better grounding in ethics, because they don't seem to teach this anymore in security programs, which just really is mind-boggling. I did want to make a comment on SWAT, though, because we actually use that technique quite a bit in counterterrorism. It's a lot scarier, though, because we'll do a SWAT on, say, Al-Qaeda or ISIS or something like that, and when you get to, their strengths, opportunities, and it gets a little scary, although their weaknesses and the threats to them are always listening. But at any rate, I just thought it was funny that you were going over a technique that we use quite a bit. So, ethical fitness. This is a module that I teach in about 40 hours. And so we have, I think, less than 40 minutes, which means if you think of this as a workout, we are doing not even a power workout, we're doing like one crunch. So this is gonna be quick. But I hope if you take nothing else away, you think just in terms of ethical fitness, because that immediately goes to the metaphor, the analogy of physical fitness, which you are all very familiar with. I don't normally talk to a bunch of people who have such grounding in the law, but I usually have to explain to my students and others that decisions. So, in terms of ethical fitness, the reason I think this is really helpful is there is such a good parallel between physical fitness and health and ethical fitness. When you are establishing a fitness routine, you need to know first and foremost what your goals are. You don't want to just start off and not have a set of goals, because then you won't know what to measure yourself against. You also need to know what your strengths and your weaknesses are going into it. And you need to create a routine, because routines are a lot easier to stick with than just trying to make it up every day, so that you can achieve your goals. This is also true for ethical fitness. You have to develop that muscle memory. When you're an athlete, you always have to develop muscle memory. You have to have self-awareness. You need to know that you're using the right form, the proper form, especially when you're an athlete, but with any kind of fitness. You don't want to do the exercise in poor form. And you need to have some resilience, because you know you're going to fail. You're going to give up at some point. You need to know ahead of time going into it, how am I going to get myself back in the gym when I give up? Because that's always a part of it. So, for ethical fitness goals, if you think about what is it you want to be known as an individual, or if it's your organization, your firm, or wherever you work, what are the characteristics that you want to be known as, or your organization wants to be known for? So I work for the government, and there's a lot of things that we want to be known for. Most of them are actually good, despite how we're known. But you have to know what your organizational values are. For me, you have so many ways you might want to describe yourself. Honest, loyal, determined, hardworking, tenacious, whatever it is. Those are your fitness goals. So for you individually or for your organization, you need to know what those ethical fitness goals are. In order for you to demonstrate these, you're going to want to build up that ethical fitness. So to reach your ethical fitness goals, you're going to want to know what your routine already is. You all already have an ethical routine. You already have a framework that you're using. So we're going to talk just a little bit about that this morning or this afternoon, and allow you to figure out what it has been and how you might want to broaden it or narrow it, depending. So ethical fitness routines, just like as in a workout routine, I go to ethical frameworks. They're all going to be very familiar to you, and I'm going through these slides very quickly for you. I can send them to you too. I usually cover 4 because so many ethical frameworks come from these 4. The first is rules-based. Now this one's going to be very familiar to all of you since you studied the law, but in addition, remember, we're outside of the law. If there are rules that guide your behavior that you already have in place, like policies, that's not what we're talking about. Those are rules. That's the difference between a right and a wrong. What we're dealing with are the differences between a right and a right, or more often wrong. There's no set way or known way or decision that you can make that's going to bring about a right. So for rules-based frameworks, we go to Immanuel Kant and the categorical imperative. the idea of precedent, something I think you guys know about. So if you're going to make that decision, are you establishing that as a rule forever, for everyone, or for the entire organization, for your family, whatever it is, that you expect to be followed every single time this kind of dilemma comes up? That's the rules-based ethics. Ends-based frameworks, much more common in the government especially. We're trying to do the most good for the most people. Now there's a lot packed into that. Who are the people? What happens to the other people that aren't in the most category? What is good? What is most good? What is bad? What's left over? How much harm have you caused? There's a lot packed into ends-based frameworks, but those are very common. Care-based frameworks, those are the idea, there's an empathy built into this one. This is the idea of, I want to make this decision based on how I would want my adversary or someone else to make that decision if they were having to make it about me. So competing organizations, competing people, you would want, if you're a care-based approach, you're going to always be thinking, well, I'm going to make this determination based on whether or not that's how I would want to be treated. And finally, situational-based ethics. Now, most people who are rules-based do not like situational-based ethics. So a lot of religious leaders in particular disagree with situational or cultural relativism because they believe rules are rules and they should be obeyed in any situation. I would argue personally that that's extremely difficult to do in the world, to always live by these rules. So even if you are a rules-based person, you might want to back it up with a bit of situational understanding. Understand the situation that you're in, understand the cultural relativist piece, particularly, again, in my world, I'm not really dealing with Americans, I'm overseas all the time. So understanding how the decision is going to impact someone coming from a completely different culture, so it's not going to have the same effect that I'm thinking it would have on me. So this is a way of helping with mirror imaging. Does that make sense? Those are the four basic. Generally, we fall into one or two of these just as an instinct. It depends on a lot of different factors, but that's usually your instinct is one of these. Within all of these frameworks, when you're making your decisions, these tensions, oh, I'm sorry, the color's not too good. These five tensions tend to come out all the time. And sometimes there's one or two that are stronger than in others. The individual versus community, all over the Constitution, for example. And lots of times when we're doing it in my line of work, it's not so much individual versus community, it's community versus community. So it's US persons versus someone else in the world. For truth versus loyalty, again, in the government context, that can be CIA, I speak truth to power. Power, on the other hand, is usually partisan. So I'm not loyal, I'm truth. But a lot of people find it very difficult in between. Short versus long term, that's an obvious one. What's good in the short term may be bad in the long term, or vice versa. That happens a lot in my line of work. Justice versus mercy, same is true. Lots of times what we think is just in the short term ends up being really a bad decision in the long term, and vice versa. And then the known versus the unknown. So this one is something that I've added on from some of the work that this course is drawn from, because our brains just gravitate toward the known. And even if we don't know, we look for, or we almost instinctively go to a historical case or precedent or an analogy or some situation that can help us feel like we know a certain amount. The problem is, because we're biased towards the known, sometimes the unknown is actually the better decision, is the better answer, but we end up going towards the known. So it's really good to explore whether or not you're biased in your decision simply because of the fear that you don't know what's going to happen next. Does that make sense? We'll experiment. Okay, so if you go back to that idea of the characteristics, I'm going to start handing these out, of the characteristics that you would like to be known, as, for yourself or for your organization, and you think about it, which of the frameworks do you think might help you more consistently demonstrate that characteristic? So that's the idea of building your own ethical code, your own framework. And like I was saying before, it's probably a combination, and it may be situational. It may be based on the kinds of dilemmas that you face. So what I thought we would do is practice. And it would be better if you guys are in groups of like 4 or 5, and you can just turn around maybe, turn around and help each other. I saw you do it with the last thing, so I know you. Okay. It's so fun to watch. Lawyers or anyone in law is so very different from my world. Yes?
I'm interning in the State Department.
Yay, so awesome. So then, like me, you're probably more used to things being very fluid and very gray and ambiguous. I know Raj and I are like polar opposites when it comes to this. It is. She's always, and then we'll do this, and then it'll be this, and then I'll be like, yeah, I'll just show up. But at any rate, so now that you're in your teams, the idea is you're going to want to think, I'm going to give you a case here, a scenario. You're going to want to think about it for yourself, individually for a minute or two. How would you approach it? And as you do that, think about which framework, or even run through all 4 frameworks, which ones of those would get you to a decision that you feel you could live with, or that you're even perhaps proud of. That's a rare thing in an ethical dilemma. So don't feel bad if you can't come to it. There's no school solution. This is really personal. When you're done, and I'll let you know, I'll give you about 5 minutes to think about it individually at the most, but then I want you to talk about it in your group and see whether or not you all come to it similarly or differently. And then as a group, maybe you can come to a decision as to what your answer would be and what kind of framework you based it on. Okay? It'll be more clear once we do it. Okay. So here you are. Does it seem like a realistic scenario? So there are no good choices here, right? This is an ethical dilemma. You probably don't have a company policy already for this. There's no law that's going to tell you what to do. There may be some laws that tell you what you can't do, I guess. But I don't know. But this is you're the leadership, right? You have to make this decision. So think about it as if you were the CEO, and then I'm going to ask you to talk about it among yourselves and your teams. Think about those the tensions. The individual versus community comes in here. Justice versus mercy. Short, long term, known, unknown. They all play in here. And whenever you're ready, feel free to start engaging with your teammates.
For me, it's just like me understanding that
like how many, if there were commonly divided attorneys that were
first one to do it, so it doesn't feel
because if there's there were 3 or 4,
you don't want to be the jack.
even if it's just 2 attorneys that are just sitting there, say this one client.
No.
Because that was really the only client we had. They were a very large client. I would say that they're no
Those
longer
are the people you want to encourage now.
because
We don't want to approach them, but they might come and sort of like
whether it's through fault of their own or not, it would seem to me that would probably be the most effective.
So it would be something that would say,
Nobody else is really
people
effective.
who like me, just like
I would think that
just blow that,
the attorney
have
would
to also come and stop and buy it.
Which side of the structure is
Yeah.
the remaining part who have matters that their interests need to
Yeah.
continue to be so those
That's not yeah, that's not the best way to do things, because you might have that time to start off with like 25 years old, and really that's all their career. There we go, yeah.
nicer way of saying what I said. Anybody else?
Along those lines, evaluation factors to consider how you're trying they have this like how many individuals are bringing
Priority.
some kind of like a very big
Yeah.
There are clients that are bringing in only a couple $1,000. Is it really that? Because now you can't get to it.
No, you need somebody who can build that relationship. Yeah, those are mostly, they may not have high profile, but they can know how to get you.
Similar stuff. I guess I didn't even think about it.
My firm, we have like actually 4 pair, we work way down, like, he works like 4 times, basically, whether they're able to do the work or not. So you might have to say it's a willing and able, they're the ones who are the go-getters, they're the ones who top two, we want to keep them no matter what. Unable, the people we deal, unable or unwilling, they're the dead weight, they're the ones that we can probably easily convert. Exactly, then there's the willing, there's the willing but unable, they're the ones, you got to know. Mediocre. Well, and not in terms of like willing, in terms of like, they have disability. It might be a conflict, but if they, something that they're, it might be something that they don't know much about, they're someone that they actually need. They're the ones who their school is open, or they just have experience. And they're the ones, and I think people who are willing, but unable, these are the people there who are there like, I don't want to dance anymore.
They work with like higher level lawyers.
I just want to take it, those are the ones who have lives absent for the organization. They're not going to be, they may not be willing to go through this. They may not be willing to take it. They might be the ones that, well, I'm out here.
So putting it in right, but if they didn't have anything to do with it, still support staff and then
Well, you know,
and protecting its financial stability and how it goes. How does that work? How does
but if they're
Can't give everybody, can't give everyone that, I get
staff that are new.
They're not talking about football, they're running everybody. Short term versus long term. You might be doing some mercy now, but you're going to find real harm in the long term.
Yes, maybe attorneys, we're looking for that opportunity to run into the race. So oftentimes baby attorneys have support staff to help them out. And I think that keeping
You want to keep the firm afloat, but keep it afloat where you're able to, where it can eventually grow.
helping those attorneys.
We still want your business, but we have to, we don't want it to go to a point where you
Sort of
can't.
like shift the functions of their attorneys.
It's more like, it's more along the lines of
I
taking
haven't
a
been
step,
working a lot
taking a step back
for
to
long,
reorganize.
but I know that it's pretty easy for you to just once you're staff, you know, how to do anything.
Yeah.
Do that skill set.
But then we can also do like, I would think also situational as well, because we have to look at, we might have to look at like individual performers.
And like kind of what you said.
Really,
To bring in the most revenues, have those clients.
We don't want to do like a categorical plus, okay, each one makes the most money, because then you might get an ageism. Because if your older performers are more likely going to make more money.
And then you figure out.
They have the biggest portfolios, they have the most experience.
And also we want to, you know, we might have,
You know, if they're the highest ranking.
Yeah, and who's responsible?
who's responsible?
Lawyers
Or, I mean, it's
would get rid of
like
them.
2008.
Only incentivize young people from staying because they work really tough, especially for the charger, and
That used to be our biggest business.
get fired.
Yeah, or there's that new hotshot firm who all of a sudden it's like has the
They
reputation.
didn't want to get like rid of the whole slate of
Yeah.
upper management.
So that's something that you
Whatever, then what do you do if you're not going off of who those clients are?
But it is kind of piggyback on that is if you're getting rid of the higher
You have no loyalty.
if you get rid of them, how many other
Like,
claims?
rapid billing is just short term. Rapid billing is very good for short term. That's what they all put. I mean, it's going to be a client base or like all money, all everything. I don't care about money. They just think about kickbacks.
Say, okay, this is method wrong. What can we do that works? Or how can we apply that to what we're going to do that's going to fix something? I think getting a new fresh mindset because the clients will lost.
I care about that one.
So if you're how do you fix these problems? How do we make sure you don't repeat mistakes? Get that fresh. So very necessary.
I know what you're talking about.
That's not going to be a
Yeah.
because you want to, you know, that's
Like one of the things that we fight with the banking industry is that like a lot of like, especially in the compliance, we're more like working together in the long term, but you have like financiers that's like, I have to answer more questions. They want this.
Has anybody come up with a brilliant solution yet? Oh, yeah?
Long term, like they don't get it. A lot of times these like line of businesses don't get it. Like, oh, by the way, we do this, we're gonna pay this now.
We're gonna listen to some
But it's gonna
solutions.
be useful.
Okay. I know you want to solve it. You want to get to like the best solution, but as I was saying, this is like an ethical crunch, you know, fitness crunch here. We don't have the time to really do the full workout. Just wanted to expose you to the frameworks and the conversation. But we have a solution over here that you all want to share.
So we thought of one for rules-based and situational-based, and we agreed that the situational-based one was probably the best. So for rules-based, we thought of a simple solution, so the last in, first out. But we also thought that that probably wouldn't be the best way to handle it. So we decided to look at it on a case-by-case basis. So even if you are one of the last people who've been hired, if you're bringing in more clients than someone who's been here for years, then we have to make that tough decision to say, we can let this person go and keep this one. So we decided to look at each employee on a case-by-case scenario.
That'll work, yes.
You're also trying to look to see who's bringing in the most money at the same time too. So while you have all the leadership in one section and you think they're the ones getting the most money, who's doing most of the work too? You need the associates. So that's another situational thing. You need a couple of associates. If you fire all the associates, who's gonna do a majority of the work? That would be longer hours. So that's another thing to look at.
Yep.
That's why we were looking at situational. But
Great, that's awesome. Anybody have anything different? All come to the same conclusion?
We actually mentioned, if you're focusing your area of law, then you might consider firing an entire department, in which case they might have the opportunity to create their own separate boutique firm.
Right, nice.
Oh, that's nice.
Yeah. Yes?
We identified two possible options. One is if it was one group of attorneys that was working with those clients, they might be in a situation where they are not helping the firm at this point, and they could be given an opportunity, like if you give them 1 or 2 months or so, if they can get some of those clients back, or if they can get other clients to replace them, that would help secure their jobs. Another option would be some staff members that might not be essential. For example, if there are multiple people in the mailroom, or if there are multiple paralegals, some of the support staff could potentially be let go to temporarily, during the tough time.
So the first part of your solution is interesting. How did you arrive at, was there, were a framework at all help you
Well,
think through that?
Part of it is, because good attorneys question all the assumptions.
Yes, of course. Always fight the scenario.
Okay. So the question is, why did people leave them? Why did the
Right.
clients leave? That makes a big difference as to how you treat it, right? If they left because a partner and his team treated them poorly, then that partner and that team, all the way down, should be held responsible because they lost a client. If they left because of economic reasons, general recessional economic reasons, then you look at it differently, because then it's not someone's fault. Now it's a question of how we're going to do what the firm needs to do. We ask, what is our goal as the leadership of that firm? Is it to survival of the firm in some context? And then you say, well, how do you go about that? And there's different ways of looking at, it may be survival of the firm, you actually get rid of some of the partners. Or you may be getting, as was suggested, maybe you look and find if there are some people that, because you're big, you're a little bloated, so you can actually get rid of some of the other. But actually, we never even really discussed the seniority. I think we all had it, but that, I don't think we really thought was last in, first out,
Right.
the right way to go.
So the reason I asked is because it sounded to me a bit like a care-based approach, the initial thought there, because most of us want a second chance. If you were presuming that perhaps through some fault of the attorneys involved, or maybe it was economic on the part of the clients, but you thought to give them a chance for a month or two. And I think probably all of us, if we were in that position, if we were on the receiving end, would have wanted that opportunity. So just being aware that that appeared like a care-based approach. Did you have a question?
Well, it also just in the train of thought behind it too, not knowing why those clients were lost.
Yeah.
Say it's a new attorney that took on their first big case with their team, they got promoted, whatever, and they've never worked with these people before, and something rubbed them the wrong way, so they left. It was one time, one mistake. But it's kind of like throwing the baby out with the bathwater if you don't at least explore why that happened. If it was repeat behavior versus a one-time situation, you're probably not going to improve. But everybody has room to improve and grow. And if you don't recognize that you're not really fostering growth and learning within your leadership capacity, which is what you should do in order to help your firm grow, and you'll lack the resilience to come back from it if you don't at least acknowledge that people do have potential in the long run.
Right. Yeah. No, thank you. Anybody else? John?
One of the factors we looked at was the remaining clients and protecting their interests. If we are representing them in ongoing matters, we continue to have a duty to them. And so whatever happens, with staffing, the attorneys who know their case, should probably be remaining.
Good. Yeah, no, that's great. Anything else?
We did discuss the possibility of everyone taking a pay cut.
Yeah,
And of course, then you raise the question that maybe nobody can survive
right.
because they're used to living at their salary. But once again, it goes back to the root cause.
Right. Anything else?
One thing I looked into is like try to like do a breakdown of like what your assets are versus what your liabilities are in terms of like your client of your staff and your attorneys. I mean, we have like I was saying, we've had like a situation where it says like you want to keep the go-getters, and you want to keep the people who want to build and develop the firm. Our mindset was we have to trim down, but we want to try to find a way to get back up to where we were.
Mm-hmm.
So that was one thing we looked at, and if we have people there who have large salaries but don't really do as much anymore because they're content just getting a paycheck, they may be the ones I can't really see them doing like being an asset in the long run, especially if all they care about is the paycheck and don't really want to build the firm up. And then the people who don't want to do anything and are just around, they may be the easiest dead weight to cut. So I don't know, I would say that maybe that's more like situational. You look at who you have and see what you can build from that.
Yeah.
Yeah, I think we did kind of a combination too of the ends-based and the care-based in that, you know, what's the long-term goal? You want the firm to survive. It's probably going to look a little different. It's going to be a little bit leaner. You know, P.A.D and I are, as government employment attorneys, we definitely didn't want to go as the rules-based way. It was how the government works with risk. First in, first out. You know, years in service. That's not going to help for in a situation like this. Yeah, you're going to have some partners who are overplayed and bloated and not bringing people in, but you can't just go with a simple metric of who gets the most billable hours, because some people are relationship builders.
Mm-hmm.
So you have to look and see, so the people who can, young or old, or associate or partner, who can bring in new business and who can continue to support the clients that you already have, are the ones you absolutely have to keep. Other people, if you're doing it care-based, maybe get a buyout. We were talking about that, giving them a bit of severance pay, and trying to protect the staff as much as you can, because the staff and the very young associates, because they're the ones that are going to be living paycheck to paycheck, so you really want to make sure that you're trying to protect them as much as possible. But pretty much the same thing as everyone else was saying.
Did you have something?
Audrey mentioned that before you ever want to fire anyone, that you should look through all the other financial options, and only as a last resort would you ever consider firing someone. So that's something that we discussed.
So you made a rule for yourself, actually, for your firm. So in terms of the tensions, first of all, I just have to observe the fighting the scenario. This is common, right? Notice how you wanted more information. Going back to my earlier comment that our brains are just very uncomfortable in this unknown space. You just want more and more and more and more information. And yes, more information might help narrow down your options, but at the end of the day, people are going to have to go, or pay is going to have to get cut, right? So you just don't want to make that decision, and that's okay. That's normal for going into an ethical dilemma. But sometimes you got to know when more information is just no longer going to help you. Maybe you just don't have the time. I know, like in my case, we do run up against the time part. Just in terms of the tensions, the individual versus community, you all had a community versus community for the most part, it sounded like. Some attorneys versus some others, and you had different ways of thinking about it. But did you notice that tension? Yeah. Truth, loyalty, justice, mercy, anything? Anything in particular? Yeah.
I don't know if this counts as justice, mercy, but when you're balancing who you might have to cut, and you're considering efficiencies versus their potential in the future to build, and you're like balancing billable hours with how much do they need this job and how much they can advance in the job. It's almost a balance of justice, mercy, because the right thing is whatever is best for the firm, but you're still balancing out mercy, like how much are they, do they need this particular position?
Yeah. No, that's a really good point. Over here.
If you decide to keep a younger partner versus an older person who's been there for quite some time, that could also create problems when it comes to justice versus mercy. Because
Yeah.
why are you keeping the younger one, but the older one who has more experience, who might not be as valuable now to the firm, and you decide to keep the younger one, that could create problems as well.
Yep.
And by the way, in that situation, you might also have like you might also have your firm exposed to like potential age discrimination lawsuits. So you gotta be careful there.
One other thing that we did discuss was the possibility of getting rid of the younger attorneys versus the older attorneys because they cost less, but it was the long term versus the short term because we discussed that in the like right now it could be good to get rid of those attorneys, but in the long run, how are like incoming lawyers gonna look at your firm if you decided to just get rid of them?
Yeah. You had something, Samuel, yeah, long and short term will often get you. Yeah.
There's definitely a truth versus loyalty, because the truth is you have to fire somebody, but the loyalty is if they're loyal to your company.
Yeah.
So if you go after a partner, either cutting their wages or doing anything like that, instead of going after the associate that just got hired, that's a truth versus loyalty.
Yeah. And it has a long-term effect. Yeah, your choices. Anything else?
And it also goes for as known versus unknown, because if you look at a partner that's been there for multiple years, but they've had the same clientele versus someone new.
Yeah.
So the unknown is that this new person could potentially bring in more clients versus the known, like we know this partner, we know what they do already.
Right. Yeah, and you don't get a crystal ball so that you can see how the future would play out. Yeah.
Right.
Yeah.
To kind of counter on that, the flip side to that is if you let go some of the more established partners, you run the risk of losing the clients who were loyal to that.
Yeah. So, no school solution, no easy solution. Mostly a wrong versus wrong choice in front of you. You're going to do some harm to some people. It's just figuring out how to minimize that as best as possible. I hope that thinking it through in terms of the frameworks helped a little bit to expand maybe what your instinctive reaction would have been. And the reason that's important is because you're going to be working with other people. Maybe it's other competing firms, maybe it's, whatever. If you're in government already, you know you're going to be dealing with other governments or other parts of the government, always in competition with itself. And to understand how other people may very passionately come to a very different conclusion and believe that they're making an ethical decision. It's important because it's not that they're unethical or bad and you are ethical and good. You're coming to it from different perspectives, but you're still feeling really strongly that you're making the best decision. So there's a lot of costs to ethics. Once that decision is made, you're probably feeling pretty crummy. And no matter what, you may feel like, okay, I did the best I could with that, but there's still part of me that feels bad. You probably had to have some very uncomfortable discussions, either with colleagues and people on your own team, or, which in this case is a leadership team. I'm sure the conversation was heated and passionate and uncomfortable because people came at it from different perspectives. But then you're going to have to go have that very uncomfortable discussion with whomever it is you're letting go or whose salary you're reducing. So there's that as well. So navigating those difficult discussions is very difficult, obviously. But you don't want to get discouraged. So you've just gone through this, and now you're thinking, do I really want to be on the leadership team of a law firm, or do I want to retire to Key West? So, yeah, you got to get back in there. So all decisions are gonna have some wrong, they're gonna have some uncomfortable aspects to them, negative, unintended consequences, but you can't give up. You gotta get back in the gym. Maybe you need to change your routine a little bit. Maybe you need to learn from the experience. Perhaps you did something wrong and you wanna learn from it, but you don't wanna give up. So you don't wanna get too down on yourself, too discouraged. It's important to learn from regret. Not to wallow in it, but to take the few minutes to actually feel it and then try to learn from it. Because then whoever was on the receiving end of the harm, it hasn't gone completely for nothing, right? You will, the next time around, be more sensitive to some issues that were unclear ahead of time. Hindsight's 20/20. So the best you can do is keep moving forward. General Nagata, just recently retired, is a 3-star general in the Army Special Forces. Spent 38 years mostly in war zones. And so he has quite a few ethical dilemmas that he's faced that have had very dire and, life and death consequences. And he told my class this, that ethical dilemmas leave residue on your soul that you will never be relieved of. It's very cheery, But he said, look, here I am, I'm retiring, and I still have this residue on my soul from my ethical dilemmas, but at least I know it. At least I am aware of it, and I can continue to work on making myself more resilient, not shying away from the difficult decisions, and learning from what I experienced in the past. Hopefully, in retirement, he will not have to face those kinds of ethical dilemmas, but, for the most part, we all will. So I think persistence and not giving up is the key. So one of the things I suggest, just like if you have a workout buddy to get you in the gym, is to find ways that keep you motivated when you're in these tough decision-making periods of your life or at work. Is make sure quotes are easy to have on your desk. I have tons of them. But whatever it is, even if it is like an ethical workout buddy, the key is the resilience and keeping yourself moving forward, forgiving yourself a little bit if you feel bad, but also moving forward and trying again. One other thing I would just mention, because we're at the end of our crunch, you don't have to practice ethical fitness on big dilemmas like this. It's best, just like I was saying, when you go into the gym, the most important thing for you to do is to use proper form. So you can do a handful of exercises in proper form is better for you than going into the gym and doing a ton of exercises in poor form. So whenever you're out and about, look for the little ethical dilemmas in your day and just mindfully go through them. If I'm following the rules-based approach, if I'm following the ends-based approach or a care-based approach, or am I going to face this situation differently than I faced the last situation? So these can be really little things, like whether or not when you see $1 on the ground, you pick it up and put it in your pocket, or do you look around to see if there's any obvious place that it came from? What are your ethical instincts? Because if you think about them in a very mindful way, you're actually building muscle memory from that experience. You don't have to be sitting down and making these huge ethical dilemma decisions in order to be ethically fit. So, any question? Good, because I have no answers.